Y'all know what it is.
Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Hey everybody, what's up? And welcome back to another episode of Eggs. Today's special guest is Taylor Desseyn. Taylor, how are you, man?
I'm very happy to be here, even after missing out on y'all's invite. I'm very thankful that we still made this happen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so a little behind the curtain action for you guys. Basically, there was a little bit of miscommunication. We're starting about 25 minutes, 30 minutes late. And so we weren't sure we were going to be able to make this happen. But Taylor, came waving his arms, and caught us on the way out the door. So here we are, and we're thrilled to do it.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into recruiting and how long you've been doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I talk really fast. So even though we're on a time crunch, I'll go real fast. So basically, name's Taylor Desseyn. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been recruiting for 11 years now. And I tell people recruiting for 11 years is like dog years. It exponentially ages you. So I'm really 77 years old. Isn't dog years? It's like one human year is like 7 years for dog or something like that. Yeah. So, but no, so I got into recruiting. I fell into it. I mean, most people you talk to in the recruiting world, like, no one dreams about being a recruiter. I was never taught this in college. To be quite honest with you, if I knew about this in college, I probably would have dropped out and just done this because it really aligns with my skill set. But no, I moved up to Nashville for music like everyone else. I'm a drummer. I was in a band in college. Actually, I was with the same lead singer for my entire music career. So I never bounced around bands. And so I guess you could say I'm pretty loyal because I've been with one company my entire career, Vaco, and I was with one lead singer my entire drumming career. And so we moved to Nashville to do music. I did the honky tonks, played at Tequila Cowboy, if anybody's been down on Broadway or can remember it. And then, I did some Broadway. I did some music row stuff, did some touring. And I was broke, working 6 nights a week, serving tables, not playing any music. And my dad was like, hey, you should probably find a day job to free up your nights. I said, you know what? That's actually a really good idea. And so I leveraged my only connection at the time was this girl I had a crush on. She didn't like me back. She liked my lead singer, which is the story of my life until I found my wife. And basically she was like, well, I nanny for somebody and blah, 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 blah. Lo and behold, that was my first boss. I've been at Vaco ever since.
That's
That's
amazing.
awesome. Well, that is the plight of the drummer, right? The guy always in the back, never in front of the lead man.
100%.
One of these weird bands like the Supervillains or somebody that has the drumming singer, which is always a wild one to see.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know how that happens, but
So like if you notice behind me, I got a lot of records. I'm the DJ, and I always like when comparing like the drummer to the DJ, I think we're about the same. We both have the most amount of gear to set up and bring in, and so I feel your pain.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess maybe a good place to start is just to talk a little bit about sort of, I guess, what the recruiting process looks like. Like you mentioned,
Sure.
I mean, you've been in it for 11 years, which is a long time in recruitingville, but it's also like an epic in, technology development and types of jobs you're recruiting for and the kinds of skill sets people need. Like so much has changed, over the course of your tenure. And I believe that you spend a lot of your time in the sort of technology space.
Yes.
So I wondered if you wouldn't maybe just talk a little bit about, why a recruiter?
Yeah. So we do a lot, and I've started to get pretty loud about this, and I'm still going to do it until someone challenges me. I truly believe a good recruiter can staff an organization better than a CEO can. And better than a hiring manager can. That's a little bit of a hot take, but I firmly stand by it because over my 11 years of recruiting, I can count on one hand the amount of companies that actually hire correctly and leverage us correctly. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about agency recruiters, right? So there's two types of recruiters. There's corporate in-house, which is, your Googles, your Facebooks, the recruiters that reach out to you directly from the companies. And then there's agency life. So I'm on the agency side of things. We work with anybody who wants to work with us. Think Mad Men, right? Ad agency kind of works with a bunch of clients. So that's what recruiters do, agency recruiters do. And that's what I am. And that's what the space I've been in for 11 years. So I've seen the behind the scenes of hundreds, if not thousands of companies, the good, bad, and ugly. And I've seen the good, bad, and ugly of job seekers as well. And so I think that's one thing that people don't understand. I get it, right? The recruiting industry is just so jacked up. So jacked up. And there's a lot of us in here. Well, I talked with a developer years ago, and he was like, I feel like recruiting is what the developers were at the .com boom, right? People can read like how to code mainframe in 90 days and go be throwing a bunch of money, and you could be pretty bad at it, but there was such a need for it that you can get away with it for a bit. And I feel like that's what the recruiting world is. But the good recruiters, we've been through the trenches. We've gone through the trenches. We've been in the trenches, whatever that saying is. I'm terrible at sayings, but basically like, we've worked with hiring managers, we've worked with job seekers. I mean, from a scale perspective, a typical agency recruiter meets 10 to 15 new people a week. Oh, wow. Not to mention maintaining those relationships, which is near impossible, which is why we get a bad rep. And then on top of that, it's kind of the same thing on the sales side too. We're constantly meeting people. So in an average, I did the math. I presented to University of Cincinnati last week to the computer science program, and they did quick math for me because I'm bad at math, which is why I'm a recruiter. An average recruiter meets 750 people a year. I've been in it for 11 years.
And then trying to maintain that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, so I'm a big college football fan. I went to the University of South Carolina, go Gamecocks. We're on a first 4-game win streak with Shane Beamer since 2013. Very excited. But one thing that I'm fascinated with is like, there's a lot of coaches out there who have not played the position, right? That are just really good at evaluating talent. And that's the same thing with recruiters, right? I've never written a single line of code, but I know how to evaluate talent. And I think that's the one thing companies continuously do not lean in on, is just our expertise, because they think that we haven't coded or we haven't been in an IT organization. We don't know what we're talking about. And that's far from the case.
Do you think it's that a little bit of the maybe leftovers from like an older era of recruiting? Because it seems like recruiting is one of those positions or one of those fields that kind of gets a bad rap. That there was like maybe some opportunistic folks in there, years ago or whatever. And so they kind of burned it for people now. And there's like some relic of old stuff that's still hanging in there.
I mean, sadly, I'd argue with you and say it's still bad now. I mean, it just is. There's a lot of organizations out there that are known to go out and hire kids out of college and churn and burn them. And those are the ones that really put a bad reputation on the ones that, I'm trying to build, that like me. Right. I'm out here trying to build relationships, but you're not going to talk to me because you had a bad experience with Shelly from so-and-so 3 months ago. That was the same agency recruiter. You're like, fuck it. I don't know if we can curse on this thing, but you say, fuck it. Like I'm not going to work with Taylor, even though he's been here 11 years. Right. So I think it's still a thing, unfortunately. And that's why I'm so loud about putting stuff out on the internet from a content perspective.
Can you, so obviously like it's all job specific. What qualities and things you're looking for in a candidate, but Can you maybe break that down as a recruiter, like your process of when you initially find someone and what you're exactly looking for?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the process is kind of crazy, just in a sense of it's a lot of repetition, but we put up a lot of people through the paces, right? So, typically a typical day in the life for a recruiter, and mine's a little different. Mine is definitely transformed over the years, but a traditional life for recruiter is like you log on every morning to LinkedIn.com, Dice, Career Builder, Indeed, and you search a filter of all of the candidates that have touched their profile in the last 24 hours. Now, here's a little hint for job seekers out there. Because we run searches on the last 24 hours, what we do is we run search on the last activity. So even just logging into your account, a Dice, and Indeed, a Career Builder, or Monster can trigger in the system to allow you to be top of the funnel, right? A lot of people know that. So that's a little job search tip there. But typically what we do is we search that, we call you, we email you. You typically don't get back to us. We call you, we email you until you finally get back to us. We schedule a Zoom call. We Zoom with you for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, get to know your background, make sure you're chill. Make sure the vibes are nice. Make sure the vibes are immaculate, as people say. And then we then send you jobs that you could be a fit for. And then we walk you through the process. We prep you for the interviews. We line up interviews. We do a post-mortem after the interviews to make sure how things went. We get you a job offer. We negotiate the job offer and we close you down on a deal. And that is just one candidate.
That's crazy. That's a lot of.
We have to do that
for just one person.
Yeah. And people wonder why recruiters never get back to them, because we're busy as fuck. That's why.
Well, that makes sense. So can you talk a little bit though about just, I guess, the identifying talent part, right? You noticed that, or you mentioned that this is a problem for, a lot of companies identifying good people, making good hires. Like what sort of criteria are you looking for? Because I imagine you get a mix of both good and bad, or people who can be groomed, or people who are just not worth talking to.
Yeah, evaluating is hard, right? I mean, so one thing I'm really passionate about is making sure my team is incredibly technical. I'm at the point in my career where I could feel pretty comfortable in a room with a CTO and just like mapping out, roadmaps, where you want to go, what type of people do you need? Do you need to go serverless? Do you need to go in totally cloud? Do you need a hybrid? Like, what are the pros and cons? Like, I'm there. Could I always know more? For sure, right? I'm not a developer, but at the end of the day, I can speak at a super high level on the VP of engineering CTO side. So I want my team to be that way, right? So I train them up. I've been responsible for training all of my teams I've been on from scratch, right? Because learning technology is like learning French or Portuguese or whatever. It is a whole different language, and you have to immerse yourself in it to really get comfortable with it. So I've been responsible for training and developing probably over 25 recruiters over my career. And on top of that, then what you have to look for is you have to really get to know the client too, right? So is the client like t-shirts and shorts for work, right? Even if they're remote, you can still tell a vibe, right? Or is it super buttoned up in government corp, right? So we have to know not only the tech side, but we have to know our client and be able to mix the two together to make sure it's a good fit. And like, those are the things that I really challenge hiring managers on. Like, if you don't give us feedback, if you don't tell us about your organization or where you want to go, or successes or specifics about the position, you're going to hurt us, because the less information you give, the less I can do with it. Exactly. Right. And so it's really this whole symbiotic relationship where recruiters have to know their stuff technically. And that's where a lot of these young recruiters really hurt the industry, because they're like, oh, I see Java on your resume, or I see JavaScript on your resume, you must be a Java developer. And it's like, no, it's not right. Stop being dumb. It's because no one takes the time to train, because it takes time. And because recruiters are such a sales-driven organization, training usually goes by the wayside. So, and then on the sales side, we really try to foster those relationships, build those relationships with hiring managers to make sure that like we can match. I mean, my goal, my team's, a little quick fact here. My team has placed close to 50 people this year. Nice. I mean, we're brand new, so like we could be doing more, but 50 is a pretty good benchmark for a first year team. And we've only had one person leave their job.
That's pretty good.
So that shows my team, one, can evaluate talent from a technical perspective really well and match them. And it shows my sales team really understands our clients to make a long-term fit.
So the way I came across you and reached out was you did an interview with Danny Thompson, and you guys were breaking down LinkedIn profiles and what you should and shouldn't do on a LinkedIn profile. And thank you for doing that, because I had a lot of errors on mine. So I went back.
Everyone does. It's okay.
But in that note, can you so LinkedIn's really important, but there's other things involved. So maybe the way my question's framed is rank in the order of importance: networking, LinkedIn, resume, portfolio, GitHub profile, leak code.
Oh man. I mean, I'll say this. I think LinkedIn is the most important platform for your career. You can throw your resume up on Dice, Indeed, Career Builder, great, but I guess it is. I say it's not searchable, but like, LinkedIn has a social aspect to it, right? The social media aspect to it. Putting your resume on Dice, like there's no community on Dice, right? Yeah. There's no like, no one's chatting on Dice about tech, right? So I'm all about community focused, like going where the attention is, and the attention is on LinkedIn right now. So I think LinkedIn 1, resume 2, and then I think depending on the hiring manager, the rest are a toss up, right? I've never had a hiring manager ask me to provide a GitHub for a candidate, but that doesn't mean that's important to some other hiring managers, right? So I think at the end of the day, though, I think when it comes to job seekers, resume LinkedIn, or LinkedIn resume 1, 2, and then I think the rest is I think important, but I think the importance scale varies for sure.
Do you ever, like in the process of working with a recruiter, you never ask them to do like a leak code example or anything like that?
We never do that. That's usually with the end client, right? And again, sure. I'll say this too. I preface this on every talk, every podcast I give. I'm only one recruiter, right? Like my way is not the end all be all. You can go shop my advice around to 15. You could have 15 other recruiters on this podcast and say, well, Taylor said this. They're like, I don't really agree. And like, and that's just the way it is. And that's why I think everybody's so freaking lost in the job search, because everybody is claiming to do something different. And I just always say, I come at it from the 5,000 plus software engineers that I've worked with in my career.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is sort of just the rise of remote work and finding talent now for remote positions. This has obviously created like a big problem, right? I mean, everybody likes remote work, or many people like remote work. And but when jobs are open up to the world, like there could be 10,000 applicants. So one of the things that comes up, or maybe more even. And so one of the things that comes up on occasion is this idea of the ATS, or the software that these companies are using for screening and trying to overcome the ATS systems. And so I wonder if you would talk a little bit about, and maybe this dovetails into Mike's question a little bit about, you know, priority and what you should be spending time on. You know, maybe it's in real life networking versus, you know, resumes at all, for example, you know, but can we talk a little bit about just sort of, you know, how you would stand out in a crowd of tens of thousands for a remote position?
Yeah, remote. I mean, hell, we could have this entire podcast just on the effect of remote work. So, you know, I'll say first off, I think remote work's been the best thing for folks looking to get in the industry. And I think it's the best thing for folks to increase DEI efforts within organizations, right? I think, you know, diversity inclusion is something I take very seriously, especially in tech, and giving people underrepresented individuals a voice in tech. And I think remote work has allowed that. I think what also remote work though has done is, like you said, you used to be in Nashville, and when we were all centralized, you would be up against 15 resumes from Nashville for a spot. Now you're up against 1,000 people for a spot, right? Because a kid in Connecticut could potentially take your spot for a job in Nashville, right? And so I think my biggest advice for job seekers, well, first off, the ATS does not reject you. You just have a shitty resume. Right. Well, let's go ahead and say that now. Like there's no goblin under the ATS bridge, like, you know, picking you off, right? Like all an ATS is just a software that organizes resumes. And again, people with bad impressions on the industry, you have these recruiters and these LinkedIn influencers out there talking about the ATS, because there's certain topics on LinkedIn that get engagement.
Sure.
Right. So on TikTok, you can go dance and be half naked on TikTok and get a lot of eyes on you. The equivalent of that on LinkedIn is talking about the ATS and how to write a LinkedIn and how to write a resume, right? It just is. And it's something I stay away from, because I don't want to just gain eyes just because of posting something like that. But the ATS, it doesn't reject you. You're rejected because you don't write your resume well enough. You don't look at the job description of the job before you submit your resume to customize your resume. And also too, you don't network. Right. I've become fascinated with this. I think the idea of networking pre-code was still shitty, right? Typical networking is what? You show up to a meetup, you eat pizza, you're probably gluten intolerant, but you have nothing else to eat. So you eat the pizza, you sit there with a stomach ache with your best friend you came with, so you don't talk to anybody else. You sit through 45 slides of a topic that you don't know, and no one actually teaches you anything because it's just slides. And then you leave with a stomach ache. You don't know anything about the topic, and you haven't met anybody because you came with your friend.
Yeah.
That was networking.
Probably right.
Yeah. And same thing with conferences, right? So I became fascinated with how do you network online, and the way to do that is through LinkedIn, right? You are able to like look at somebody's profile, view somebody's profiles, find connections before you DM somebody. So your intentionality when it comes to networking is a lot easier, because if I just came up to you guys at a conference, you know, it's that whole like, hey, what do you do? And then you say you're a podcaster, and we all go, ha, 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 right? I mean, it's just like, it's just kind of a weird thing. So networking virtually is huge. And I'll tell individuals this, I think to get by the ATS or to get a look is to actually spend the time DMing folks and saying, hey, listen, I've admired what your company has done for a long time. Do you got 6 minutes to talk to me about what makes that company so special to work at? Yeah. And you have those conversations one by one, but it's such a mind fuck, because your best friend Sally is over here applying to 500 jobs a day, and you've talked to 2 people. And so our minds, and this is society, right? We're always more activity. But when it comes to the job search, it's all about depth, not width. Right. And so it's like, you know, doing podcasts like with y'all two, like that's deep, right? I'm spending 30, 40, 50 minutes with y'all, or however long it's going to go. Like that's deep, right? Instead of with, where it's like, I just maybe see out y'all at conference and shake your hand and get your business card, which I'm eventually going to throw away anyways and move on, right? It's all about going deep, which is incredibly important in today's job search and to stand out among the thousands of applicants.
Yeah.
No, it's funny that you say that. Yeah. So I was participating in some, line of questioning. It was a thing on LinkedIn. Somebody, a junior designer, was basically saying, it's hard for junior designers to find work, junior UI designers to find work, because basically every job post wants a senior, but they want to pay you for a junior, right? So they're having a really hard time finding work. And it's funny that you went right to that sort of version of networking where you do this kind of slower burn. And maybe I'm just old, because that was the first thing that occurred to me. But but that was a lot of my content, or a lot of my comments to their, questions, or, spend some time actually getting to know these people, get intentional, pick the companies that you want to work for, then sow the seeds, right? I have a kind of an interesting employment record, and so does Mike. And so neither of us are probably the best at this job seeking thing. But the fact is, the thing that would occur to me is to do something, you have to in real life, right?
Yeah, you have to remember, and not remember, you have to know LinkedIn. You can get on there today, message any company you've ever wanted to work for with some hiring manager, and potentially strike up a conversation today. Yeah. I could go message a hiring manager at Twitter. Like, hey, I love Twitter, love the platform. How things going with Elon? Let's talk for a few minutes. I would love to pick your brain. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, speaking of Twitter, you're a huge fan. Like one of my questions on there is to ask you why Twitter, because I wouldn't have thought of using Twitter as a job hiring platform. Can you maybe break that down a little bit for us, why you like it so much and some benefits you've seen by using Twitter?
Yeah. So, again, talking about community, building community, you have to go where your people are, right? And whether that's a conference, whether it's a meetup, whether that's Discord, Slack channels. That's another thing. Like, Discord and Slack channels are the new meetups. They just are. And I know there was Zoom fatigue in 2021. Now there's Discord and Slack fatigue. Do I need another community? Right. And so I've been I'll get to Twitter in a second. This is how I talk. I talk in like circles, but basically, Discord, Slack, like I created one for my team. We almost have 100 engineers in it, and all we do is post our jobs, right? Like, I think if you want to go Slack or Discord, it's got to be very, very intentional. And you have, like, I've been sitting on this Discord idea for 6 months now before I pulled the trigger, because I wanted it to be very thought out. And we had a bunch of ideas, and I just kept it super simple. So find Discord, find Slack. There's no reason to not be in community somewhere. To answer your question about Twitter, is I saw early on, there is a huge, like, basically the entire tech industry lives on Twitter. Now, for those of you who listen to this down the road and you're like, well, I'm not on Twitter. Well, that's your problem, right? I learned early on that the amount of, I posted a tweet yesterday that went semi-viral on Twitter, whatever that means for everybody. But basically, like, I was clicking on profiles of people that responded to me. And I was like, senior Azure engineer from Microsoft, senior security engineer from Google, senior front-end developer from Netflix. And I was like, what platform could you post something in the tech industry outside of LinkedIn and have that type of like talent engaging with you randomly? It's an incredible platform, but Twitter is its own thing. And I don't know if we're going to talk about content, but the reason why I'm so passionate about, like, I think every company, and this is not an original saying, right? Gary Vaynerchuk has said this. I've had a few other people on TikTok that have said this. Everybody needs a mascot right now. Like, everybody needs somebody out there, whether it's an actual mascot, like Duolingo with like their green bird that terrifies me, right? Like Duolingo, or just a human being, right? And who's out there actively in the community, going to conferences, doing social media. Because it's so funny. What I realized is that social media crafts our narrative, right? Like, my wife and I are at the dinner table sometimes, and she's like, hey, did you see the Instagram post I sent you? Hey, did you see what so-and-so said or posted on TikTok? Or did you see what your mom posted on Facebook? Right? Like, social media drives our like daily conversations. So I was like, well, why don't I start driving? Like, it's weird sounding, but I want to be at somebody's dinner table without being at somebody's dinner table. Did you see what Taylor posted today? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, that's been my goal. And I think what I've seen on Twitter is you can build an incredible community on Twitter, but it's different, right? I use this example all the time. When you're and your buddies or your girls, your gals, or whoever's listening, go out on the lake. You know, you got your White Claws and your Trulies. Trulies better than White Claw. Don't at me. But basically, High Noons is still the best. But basically, when you go on a lake and you sit on a raft, you don't move really. You just sit there, right? And that's what LinkedIn is, right? You can post something on LinkedIn and it sits there, and the way the algorithm works, like it helps you out, right? Like your post kind of gets looks throughout the day. Twitter, though, is its own animal. Twitter is like a stream of consciousness. Twitter is like if you and your boys like went down the river, like you know, some people do that, and you go quickly sometimes. That's what Twitter is. It's a babbling brook. You kind of have to keep your thoughts out, and it takes a lot of my time. But man, it is such a great way. And this is a terrible, terrible term, but it's the only thing I can think of. It's like a slow drip. You just drip on people, right? You know, I say this all the time. We as human beings kind of over romanticize the way of the old, right? Thank you letters, firm handshake. There's nothing, you definitely have a firm handshake. Don't be a bitch when you shake someone's hand. But but the thing is, though, is that the handshake, hey, how are you guys doing? My name's Taylor. What do you do? That is now liking and commenting on somebody's status on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's a slow drip. You're constantly in front of people, right? And so to finish your question, yes, Twitter is a huge place, especially in the engineering world, to get a lot of eyes on you, but you got to know how to use it.
I can totally relate to that.
Makes sense. Well, and it's funny because you hit sorry, Mike.
Go.
I was going to say he hit on a keyword, which I think is basically just intentionality, right?
Yes.
So regardless of what we're doing, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, you know, whatever you're doing it with purpose is kind of the name of the game, it seems. So even when it comes down to putting in a resume and fighting off the wicked, you know,
ATS, the goblin under the bridge.
Yeah, you know, but if you're intentional and you say, you know what, damn it, I want to work at Apple or I want to work at wherever, and I'm going to take the time to really craft this resume, and I'm going to make sure I'm answering the questions they're asking, and I'm going to make sure I'm doing these things. Like just that extra effort, that intention is going to be the thing that, you know, puts you into the you know, top 5,000 instead of the, you know, dustbin of history, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I did, I'm a recent boot camp grad.
Nice.
But one thing that I have done is there's tutorial videos on YouTube that you can go and try and learn more topics or whatever. And one thing that I do is I'll follow specific people on YouTube that are, you know, I'm focused on Django and React and Next.js, kind of my core, but there's a guy named Dennis Ivey that teaches Django tutorials, and I subscribe to him, and I'm always looking to see when he's online coding, and I'll join in the conversation on the side.
Great.
Trying to make just comments and you know, even doing the $20 thanks for helping out and doing this content, it just puts you in front of people's eyes.
It absolutely does.
That's another trick per se that I think it is very beneficial.
Yeah, the job search is all about top of mind, man. I mean, like, you know, if you messaged me and I didn't have a fit for you at the time, and then you message me 3 months from now when I post something on Twitter or LinkedIn that's a fit for you, I'm going to remember you. And if you message me like, hey bro, I saw your post, I think I'd be a pretty good fit for this role. I'll be like, oh shit, Mike, yeah, that sounds great, let's do it. But if you didn't reach out to me to begin with, I wouldn't know who you are, and that second conversation wouldn't be as easy.
Exactly. As a recent boot camp grad, I've been hesitant to reach out to people because the inadequacy, the you know, the self-doubt that comes into play.
100%.
As someone coming to like a recruiter that's a new grad, are there things that will you even work with a recent boot camp grad, and B, is there a right way and a wrong way to approach you?
So I hate this. At the end of the day, most companies, because again, companies pay us a fee based off salary
Sure.
of the candidate we place. Most companies don't want to pay us to find a junior developer because they could put up a job posting and find 300 on their own.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't really get a lot. Again, I've actually placed a handful of junior devs in my career, but I've also done 11 years. So like that's, I think, what, like one every 2 years. So it's not like a great track record by any means, but you know, I think it's really important though for junior devs to network with recruiters. And here's why. You need to get comfortable interviewing. Actually, so my podcast, Guidance Counselor 2.0, I interviewed a individual coming out of boot camp, and he got a job, and I interviewed him, and I learned something from him. Like, I love doing podcasts. I love, because I always learn from somebody. I'm sure y'all do as well. And he was like, I actually got really good at interviewing. I was like, well, how'd you do that? He goes, I forced myself to like essentially approach every recruiter like it was like the final interview for a company.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he goes, I used recruiters as my practice. I was like, damn, I've been doing this for 11 years and I've never thought about that. That's brilliant. And so I think junior devs should go all in on recruiters. I think they should have as many conversations as possible. I think they should ask for a tip or trick every time I talk to a recruiter. What does my LinkedIn look like? How, like, what's one thing that can be fixed? If you talk to 10 recruiters and you ask them what's one thing that can be fixed on my resume, you're going to have a pretty good looking resume by the 10th conversation for free. Right. So, you know, thinking about leveraging those folks kind of in a different way, interview practice, LinkedIn, you know, resume review. And who knows, maybe they do have a junior job, right? And then that's even better for you. But I would lean on recruiters as a way to learn and practice more than trying to find a job. I think the best word track that junior devs could use coming out of boot camp or college is messaging hiring managers at companies on LinkedIn and going, hey, can I get 6 minutes of your time? I would love to know what you look for when you hire a junior developer. And like, what does that signal to the hiring manager? This person's interested, they're curious, they're on it. Like, it's all the things. And then if that hiring manager says yes, guess what you just did? You got yourself a job, or not job offer. You got yourself an interview.
Yeah, I love that. I like the thought of using it as practice for the interview.
Yeah.
So when someone reaches out to you, do you essentially do an initial assessment and test mock interview with them to figure out what you're looking for? Is it like a real interview, or is it just a conversation?
It's more of a conversation, but I can definitely, and again, this is just me, right? Some people may have more of a formalized approach. I've always been very casual, extremely casual. I've never been buttoned up. The one time I was buttoned up in my career, I was told to stop because it just came off weird. So, you know, I think, you know, I think the biggest thing I see is that people can't either talk about themselves, where they've been, where they want to go, or what they've been doing. And I think that's where most people fail. Most people, listen, I talk to so many hiring managers on my podcast about junior devs. They view all junior devs the same technically. Like, they're all in the same bucket, but it's how you communicate. And that's where most people really, really mess up.
Yeah. Interpersonal skills is key.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about maybe more senior people then too.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know, obviously the challenges for a senior person are a little bit different. But one of the things that I'm curious about in particular is, as somebody who's been in a field for any given period of time, I mean, you start to wear lots of hats, you learn lots of skills, you become a lot of things. So how do you help people who might be looking for a new position to articulate a broad, you know, set of expertise into something that can be fine-tuned into a position somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult. I mean, I think that's kind of the balance and the challenge of writing a resume, especially for senior folks, is that, you know, that's where I really dig in with seniors and say, okay, what do you really want to do next? Like, what do you really want to do? Because I'll tell you this, most seniors can't answer that either, right? I mean, after talking with a bunch of seniors, a bunch of juniors on my podcast for the last 2.5 years, one thing I realized is no one has any idea what they're doing, even seniors. I literally had a senior developer the other, like a few months ago, working at a big company that y'all would know of. And he was like, I'm literally trying to talk myself out of the job search because I hate interviewing and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, literally, like, imposter syndrome is real from junior all the way to senior. But like, when it comes down to, like, you know, if you've been doing full stack development, front end, back end, full stack, cloud, all the buzzwords from front to back, I would challenge you for your next job and be like, what do you really want to do? And if you're like, Taylor, I want to do all of it, I think there's a way to write your resume that way, but you need to be very specific and take away a lot of fluff words, right? Good communicator, great leader, you know, all this stuff. I think, some of the senior folks that I've worked with that are consultants have done a lot of different stuff. I mean, I even just tell them, listen, don't give me any fluff words, man. Like, tell me 2 or 3 bullet points of what you did with this project, 2 or 3 bullet points, what you did with this project. And then like, just keep it incredibly technical throughout the entire time. Because I think what happens is a lot of senior folks try to fluff their resume with a lot of things that don't need to be in there. And then it becomes hard to read. Like, I need your deliverables, what you delivered, your accomplishments. I don't need a bunch of tasks. I just need project-based work accomplishments. And that really goes a long way. That's my advice for seniors is to get super granular on your resume, but really know what you want and why you're looking before you look.
Yeah, I'd like to dig in a little bit more on that idea of what do you really want to do, just because I think that it's sort of a human condition, not just the condition of the dev or the job seeker, this idea of what we're really doing. And a lot of people fall sort of victim to, they think what they want is what they see in other people, right? So like you mentioned, imposter syndrome runs the gamut. If you're a mid to a senior or something, like the way that you're making a definition about what you might want to do next is, oh, I want to do what that guy's doing. Look at the, the car he's driving or the corner office he's got, or that, whatever your criteria is. And so we're basing what we want on somebody else's want. And so I wondered if you had any just sort of, I don't know, suggestions or exercises or anything that you go through with people to sort of drill down to uncover what it is they really want. Because honestly, I think as it pertains to most things, I don't really think people know what they want most.
Yeah, no, they don't. So I'm going to go old school here, pen and paper. Now you're like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I got a phone. Why would I do that?
Exactly. So, and I will tell you this, I did a little bit of exercise myself recently, right? Just to check myself. And I'm always on my phone, right? Computer, phone, content, 24/7 recruiter. I mean, I work way too much. Wife, if you eventually watch this, I'm admitting to it. And so, my thing is,
don't worry.
Say, well, we'll edit that out.
We'll edit that out.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, pen and paper, because we as human beings, if we write on our phones, we're going to get distracted.
Yeah.
We just are. TikTok is a thing, right? I mean, it just is. And so the one thing I did is I stepped away from the house a few months back and took a pen and paper and I just journaled. And one, I realized how bad my handwriting has gotten, but also 2, it allowed me to not be distracted. And you know what I did is I just said, hey, what are the things I love about my job? And what are the things I don't like about my job? And I was in a negative spot, to be totally honest. And when I got done writing, guess what I realized? There was a lot more pros than cons on my list, right? I think we as human beings focus so much on the cons that we think that everything's bad always, when actually it isn't. Right? Oh, manager said I can't do this. Fuck him. I'm gonna leave. All right, well, I'll challenge you. What are all the things the managers let you do? Right? And then you're gonna realize, you're like, holy cow, there's a lot of good that's still here. But listen, there are times it's time to cut bait and go. Like, there are times for sure. But I would write those, until your con list is more than your pro list, you need to stay where you're at. And try to work on it. The big thing I talk to people about, especially seniors, is the things you're dealing with a company issue or an industry issue, right? If your boss does
problems at another company,
you're always going to have problems wherever you go. You always are. You're never going to walk into a situation like, man, it may be great for 6 months, but then the dating period is going to be done. So you really need to dig in. It's like, is this a sign of like organizational rot is what I call it. Organizational rot. Is it like an organizational based level, or is it just on your manager level or your peer level? Because those things can be fixed for the most part. And if they can't, then maybe it's time to go. If it's an organizational issue that like, it's not going to change, then maybe that's a little bit more of a reason for you to leave. And I tell people this, and I've had a bunch of conversations. I love that you brought this up, because I've had a bunch of conversations with folks about this. If you want to go chase the bag and get the money, go get the money. There's nothing wrong with that. Go get the money. If you want to chase the title, you want to be a VP of engineering and CTO at 26 years old, I will argue with you that will actually hurt you. Go ahead. But at the end of the day, the two things that run out at a certain point that are finite: titles and money.
Yep.
Then you're like, well, Taylor, I can go to Fang and I can like stock and I can make $1 million. Well, great. Go do that. But at the end of the day, there's still a cap.
Yeah.
right? And what's going to happen? Like typical human beings, we're going to take on more, we're going to spend more based off our living, and we're still going to, like, it all levels up, right? You make $1 million, you're going to spend 900,000 in a year, right? I mean, we just, that's who we are as humans. And so what I've really told people is like, what about the industry? What about the tooling? What about, opportunity to mentor? What about leadership opportunities? Like, let's get past the title and the money shit. And like, let's go one step deeper into what you really want. That's where the magic starts to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because I mean, almost using your Twitter metaphor of the guys in the babbling brook, right? It's like, I feel like a lot of us get trapped in that, right? We just spend our days kind of doing the thing we always did, or, letting life kind of happen to us, right? Good opportunity comes down the pike, or something that seems interesting to us, so we kind of follow it. And, it doesn't mean that we were looking for it. Maybe we don't even want it, but it's the thing that was presented to us and it seems better than what we have. So we kind of just go with it. And I think there's a lot of that. And so, I mean, if there's like a recurring theme that I'm seeing here as it pertains to resume writing, as it pertains to job seeking, as it pertains to all this stuff, it's being intentional with what we're doing, right? And it's, all the way down to the personality level, right? How do we be intentional with the life we want to build? Like I'm notorious for this. I am really bad about setting goals and stuff around life. And, I'll set some like arbitrary thing like, ooh, well, I'd like to have 2 Porsches, one, I want the old one and the new one of the same, or whatever. But it's like, okay, but then what? Like, so cool.
Well,
you've got
and it's fun. And it's funny. I'll be totally transparent here. Like, I've been dealing with a lot of comparison issues this year. I mean, in a way, I guess took a step back from a comp perspective, because I stepped out of production to lead a team and to grow a team from scratch, which obviously has been a challenge, especially didn't expect a recession to hit as I'm trying to scale a team.
Right.
But there's a lot of comparison. Like I deal with this. A lot of the reason why I talk out in public to podcasts is just honestly like self-therapy, to like figure my shit out publicly. Right.
We can say the same thing here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like, like for me, it's always been a dream of my wife and I to have a kid and to live on a horse farm. Guess what I have now? I have a 2-year-old who's perfectly healthy, who's a tornado, and she's wonderful. And I have 4 horses on 15 acres, 25 minutes outside Nashville.
That's awesome.
So who am I comparing to?
Yeah, no, It's funny. I saw a quote kind of like this the other day, actually, that sort of maybe is relevant, but it was sort of this idea that, let me see if I can kind of scrap it together from memory. But basically the concept was that, oh, well, how come you're working so hard? Well, I want to save so I can travel, and I want to go to Europe, and I want to spend a month in Europe or whatever. So I'm killing myself so I can go to Europe for a month. And this guy and the other person in this cartoon or whatever was like, you could mow yards for the summer and go to Europe for the, I mean, so what are you talking about? You're killing yourself. You're doing 80 hours a week. You're working entire careers and you're putting off life, right? You're putting off all these years and not doing the things that you want to do, when really it takes almost nothing to generate the kind of income for what you want to do, and just knowing what you want to do, you can sort of land that, right? I mean, my wife and I have aspirations of at least spending part of our year in Spain and
Nice.
on the beach over there in Spain. And, we have older kids now. So it's kind of like my oldest is 16, but they're like at an age in school where I can't just flit off, because I could probably achieve the goal, but, I need to wait because they need to have a house to live in.
Sure.
And so, so we have to wait for a minute. So we're postponing our goals, but not for any reason, that, isn't just sort of like logical, right? I mean, we're not putting it off like emotionally because we're afraid or anything like that. But so many people are afraid or so, I guess, unintentional with their lives that they don't think about these things, right? They don't think about the thing that they want to do, and then they don't realize how attainable it really is.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm saying this all for, my own self as well, because, I am working a ton right now. Right. And it's something that, I brought up with my wife, and, we're trying to go on the same page and trying to be more intentional with family stuff. So again, I mean, you kind of have to ask yourself, and again, going back to intentionality, being intentional, most people don't do it. It's hard to do. I struggle with it, but I think if you can become intentional from a work perspective, I think a lot of things will fall into place for sure.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're kind of at that time, and that's a great thing to go out on, actually. Can you maybe tell people where they can reach out to you and get in touch if they A, are looking for employees, and B, if they're looking to get hired?
Yeah, well, first off, guys, thank you for having me. I feel like we could have chatted for the next 6 hours. So yeah, for those of you, I would say email is the best, Taylor@vaco.com, VACO.com. And I'm on all social media handles but Snapchat and Be Real. So at Desseyn, TDESSEYN. Yes, I'm on TikTok, and no, I don't dance.
So I actually, just sidebar here, I just am in the process of getting hired for a radio station, and one of their requirements is I had to download and start using TikTok, which is I'm dreading it.
I love it. Yeah, that's another conversation. It's a lot of fun, but boy, it is a time suck, so be careful with that.
Exactly.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. This has been awesome. I really appreciate the insights that you've given us. And, I think there's some really good information in there. And honestly, I mean, maybe it makes sense to circle back around in 6 months or a year and see where it's at, just because, I think, especially given, impending recession, changes in technology, with Web3 on the horizon, all these things, there's going to be a lot of new stuff. As it pertains to not just, finding jobs, but, hiring people and finding people who have the kinds of skills we're looking for. So it might make sense to circle back one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, and thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.